Hey y'all, welcome to Roots and Refuge Farm. My name is Jess. This is my garden. You know those signs where people put up and they're like, hey, sorry about the mess, but we live here? I feel like right now in my garden, we need a sign that says, sorry about the mess, it's August. It's gone wild and I'm here for it. Today I want to talk to you guys about my very favorite things to grow, crops and varieties in the fall garden. I have a list here to try to keep on track. I intended on calling this my top 10 favorites, but then I wrote down 12. I like so many things that I didn't want to leave any of them off the list. I love growing a fall garden. Now, I live in balmy South Carolina where we are having a very warm, muggy summer day today, but it is time for me to be gearing towards the fall garden, both starting seeds and clearing out the wild spaces, the finished spaces, and getting areas ready to even direct sow as we go into fall and winter crops. In a place like this, I can grow even outdoors all winter or with a little bit of cover, like a low tunnel. I can grow my high tunnel all winter. But you can grow a lot of food in a lot of places. So don't give up yet. Just because the fall garden is not highly marketed the way that the summer and spring garden is, it is a very valid time to grow food. And for some people, it is their favorite time to grow food because it is a little more hands-off than the summer garden, which can be very demanding. I have another video that goes very extensively into the topic of growing in the fall. I will put a link to it down below if you want to kind of figure that out. But today, the point is not to teach about fall gardening, but to talk about some of my favorite things to grow in the fall garden. So I'm going to hop in on my list. These are not in really a particular order. I like all of these things and I would be sad for any of them to be missing. But I will say I have some varieties listed here that are like special favorites of mine, but a lot of times when it comes to the fall garden, if I don't have the correct set of circumstances to start seeds in time, I'll just go to a local nursery and buy starts and just grow what it is that they have. And to me, that's better than not growing anything at all. So don't write that off. One of my favorite things to grow in a fall and winter garden is kale. Kale typically does do better whenever it's cold outside. You can grow it in the heat and it can kind of handle the heat sometimes, but you're just going to get a lot more bitter. In fact, most of the things I'm talking about today, not only do they thrive in cooler temperatures, they actually taste a lot better in cooler temperatures, because when plants are overwintering, they're not focusing on making seeds. So all the things that we're growing in fall and winter gardens are typically what we call vegetables, which that doesn't really mean anything in the plant world. You know, the tomatoes here, the peppers, the melons, all of these things are fruits. The seeds are in the fruit, which is kind of like the ovary of the plant. With vegetables, we're just eating parts of the plant, the leaves, the stems, the roots. For those plants to grow seeds, you typically have to let them mature past the point that you would want to eat them, and they put up like their center stalks, they bolt, they go to seed, and they make their seeds. That being said, we grow these things when the temperatures are cool, which is not the time that they make seed, and they're at that point trying to store sugar, they're trying to store energy, and that's where we get that sweeter flavor, the better flavor that we're looking for. And with kale, that is so the case. If you've grown kale in the past and thought it didn't taste very good, once kale has had the touch of frost, the flavor is completely different. It's so tasty. I like pretty much all kale varieties. I do typically cook them. I find them easier to digest once they have been cooked. And my favorite kale variety, if I had to choose one, which is hard because I usually grow about 6 different varieties, I would probably say Ragged Jack. It's also Red Russian. Those 2 varieties are interchangeable to me. If I get seed packs for both and grow them, I can't tell them apart. So I think likely they're the same variety that, you know, diverged at some point in its history and got named different things. It is, in my experience, the most hardy variety of kale. I've had Ragged Jack kale survive outside in sub-zero temperatures and be okay, maybe just a tiny bit of damage, and of course the flavor was phenomenal. I like it. It's also softer. The leaves, you know, of course, curly kales, dino kales, they just are very they're just dense and the bite is different, whereas Ragged Jack kale is kind of frilly looking and the actual leaves are a little bit softer. So whenever you're cutting them up, you're cooking it in things, it just typically, I enjoy it more. The next thing is arugula. I listed this separate from lettuce because its flavor is so very different. Of course, with lettuce, you know, you make salads and all that stuff. With arugula, you can throw it in salads, but I really love putting arugula on things like burgers, on tacos. Oh, I just saw a beautiful big white crane fly across the pasture. Sorry, I got distracted. Arugula is so spicy, and it can get, for me, unbearably bitter when it's warm outside. It also bolts really fast, so it just doesn't do very well here a lot of the time during the year. But I love putting it in one of my green stalk planters where it'll stay nice and clean, and it just adds such a nice kick to things. I make sure I grow arugula every winter. It is a short season thing for me. I get it started, I usually get it going like October to November-ish, and then I harvest it as the weather is cool, and as soon as it starts warming up in March and April, it pretty much peters out. I don't have a favorite variety of arugula. They're pretty interchangeable to me. I've never had one really stand out as being better than the others. Next, Brussels sprouts. If you have never had a homegrown Brussels sprout, I would venture to say you may have never really tasted what Brussels sprouts are supposed to be like. The flavor of store-bought Brussels sprouts is not vastly different in my experience to homegrown Brussels sprouts, but the texture is hugely different. I like roasting Brussels sprouts. That's our favorite way to eat them. We just quarter them or halve them and roast them in some sort of fat in a very hot oven, and then toss them with something acidic and maybe something a little bit sweet. So like tossing them with a little bit of lemon juice, maybe some balsamic vinegar, cooking them in like bacon grease, having a little bit of meat in it, some bacon in it. Oh, they're so, so good. And homegrown Brussels sprouts have this light, airy texture that I've never experienced outside of ones that I had just harvested out of my garden. It's actually one of the highlights of the winter garden for us. Brussels sprouts, however, take a very long time to grow. They are a 100+ day variety of food. And with that being the case, if it's gonna be like here, very hot, like through September, it's kind of hard to get your seeds started early enough to get them in the ground, and with enough time for them to come to fruition before the spring heat comes and causes issues. With that being said, for me to start seeds of Brussels sprouts, I typically have to start them in like mid to early July in an air-conditioned place, and I have to grow them indoors until it's cool enough outside to move them out. It makes them a little bit of a difficult thing to grow with the circumstances I'm growing in. I know people who have like mild falls and like cool temperatures typically do better with these. With that being the case, I wrote down the variety Long Island Improved. Those are the ones I've had the best success with growing from seed. Here, however, most of the time I buy starts for Brussels sprouts, at least for the last few years where I haven't had a good air-conditioned space. When I used to have a basement in our old house, I started them, then I did Long Island Improved. But since I've been living here, I've bought them, in which case I'm using whatever variety I can get my hands on. And they're still the best I've ever had. Doesn't matter what variety they are, it's just being homegrown. Next, sugar peas, or English peas. Now, I'm Southern, you may have noticed. We grow what we call peas all through the summer. Those are cow peas. This is different. These are like green peas. English peas are shelling peas. And you can grow snap peas, which is where you just harvest the pods immature and you eat the whole pod. Or you can grow shelling peas, which is where you let the peas grow and mature and fill out, and then you take them out of the shell and then eat like buttered green peas. So I wrote two different varieties down. I wrote one of my favorite for each. Shelling peas, where you let them mature and then shell them. That's a difficult crop here with the heat that I have. Telephone peas are the ones I've had the best success with, but it's not something that I try to grow a ton of. We grow and we enjoy them like a few times, usually in salads. Sometimes we'll have them as a side. But snap peas are great here. And for my fall garden, that's primarily what I focus on. My favorite variety of snap peas are called purple magnolia, or they're sometimes called sugar magnolia snap peas. They're so whimsical. They have these lovely tendrils, and the purple ones, the actual pod is purple. It turns green when you cook it, so you don't get to enjoy that on the eating end. But if you eat them raw, that's great. They do really well when the weather is cool. As long as they've been able to acclimate to the cold, meaning you don't go from like really warm temperatures to an extreme dip into deep freeze, they do pretty well even after a mild freeze. So I always plant them in the fall garden. It is a touch of a gamble because if you do have a really hard deep freeze, they will get damaged. But I plant them anyway, and some years I get a ton before they die. Some years I get a handful before they die. But they're worth planting. They're beautiful, and they don't take up just a ton of space. With the shelling peas, I focus less on those in the fall. That's more of a spring thing for me, just because they need more time for the pea in the pod to actually mature and fill out. They take probably, I would say, upwards of 3 weeks longer than the snap peas where you're eating the immature pod. And with the fact that I'm already gambling on those peas making it through the freeze, it's just more of a gamble. If you want to take it, if you've got the space, you could try to grow shelling peas. They're delicious once it has gotten cold. Like when they have frosted a few times, that's when you're going to get like the super, super sweet peas. But one tip you may not know, and I'll get back on topic. Peas begin converting their sugar to starch as soon as you pull them off the plant. So if you need to shell your English peas, your green peas, you need to pick them and shell them and be prepared to can them, freeze them, or eat them right away. Because if you, like, say you pick them 2 days before and stick them in the fridge, they're not going to be nearly as sweet when it comes down to eating them. So just keep that in mind. Next, Napa cabbage. I wrote this separate from regular cabbage, and this is why my list got long, because I can't generalize. Napa cabbage is they're sometimes called Chinese cabbages. They're the big oblong heads, kind of frilly. They have the greatest texture that, and you can use them anywhere you would use a regular cabbage. You can cut them up, chop it and fry it. You can make coleslaw out of it. They are the primary ingredient if you're making kimchi, which is a ferment. And you can also use Napa cabbage to make sauerkraut. So it makes a really, really good sauerkraut. I like Napa cabbage a lot because it has that lighter, airier texture. And I guess that's becoming a theme I haven't really noticed before, but I guess that matters to me because I mentioned it on the kale, the Brussels sprouts. You know, cabbage just kind of has that kind of squeaky thing sometimes, and I don't hate it. I'm not like terribly upset about that, but I guess I kind of like that lighter and airier texture. The homegrown Brussels sprouts, the Ragged Jack kale, and the Napa cabbage. It also, I feel like maybe is a little sweeter than regular cabbage, Napa cabbages. And when you make things like sauerkraut with it, it's just basically a twist on what you may have come to expect. Napa cabbage, I do actually have a very specific variety that I am particular to, and it is called 1 kilo slow bolt. Might not be a problem for you if you live in a cooler place, but here, Napa cabbages, I will say, are very prone to going to seed quickly, like a few warm days and they go. I've had the best success in growing Napa cabbages in my high tunnel under shade cloth because even with the winter here, we can have warmish days and sunny days, even in the winter, and it can still be too much for a Napa cabbage. So that 1 kilo slow bolt, they're big, and they don't go to seed as readily. We harvested a lot of Napa cabbage just the last couple of years. Growing that variety in the high tunnel, we figured out that that works for us. Next, turnips. Again, very similar to rutabagas. We'll get to rutabagas later. Turnips are a special, I have an appreciation. I see hummingbirds. There are 2 of them, and I can't turn my camera around because I'm sure they're zooming around. We'll miss them. There they go. Turnips are, for me, they fill the void of needing fresh fruit for salads. Being in a warm place, salads, like green salads with fresh veggies on them, is actually more of a fall and a winter food for me if I'm looking to eat from my land, because salad greens just don't grow well here when it's warm. They taste bad. I've done tricks, I've done them under shade, I've done different things, and I can squeak out a little bit of salad greens, but they're not going to be fantastic. Salad tastes the best in the winter, but then all the lovely fruit and the things that come in the summer, I don't have them to put on the salad. But you can take white turnips, any variety of white turnips, and you can matchstick them, cut them in little strips, and they go really, really well on a salad. They lend sweetness and a crunch, and I absolutely love them raw in that way. Fermented and pickled turnips are really, really great to snack on and to add to a plate. And then also you can cut up turnips and cook them as you would potatoes. I will sometimes dice them, and like if I'll put a chicken on top of them and roast it, and they just kind of suck up all of that chicken flavor, and they're so flavorful and tasty. I did not ever eat a turnip until I was well into adulthood. I had never experienced turnips at all, and I absolutely love them. My favorite is the white varieties. There's purple top, there are yellow turnips, there's different kinds, but the solid white varieties picked when they're about like a little bit smaller than a baseball. That's my favorite. That's when you're gonna get the most sweetness out of them. There's one variety called White Lady. We've grown a lot. There's one that's a Japanese variety called Hakura. I'm sorry. My son, who speaks Japanese, would be rolling his eyes at me right now. But either one of those, any white variety is pretty good. I've tried several. Those stand out to me because that's just what I've bought seeds for multiple times. But I like all turnips. The white ones, I think, have a crisper and sweeter flavor, whereas they're like, I would say the other ones have a little bit more pronounced turnip flavor. Next, regular cabbage. My 2 notable varieties are Red Acre. That's a red purple cabbage. I will say that is a favorite for me. It makes fantastic kraut. It is great fried. It's great in slaws. It's got a sweetness to it, a brightness to it. I really, really love Red Acre cabbage. That's like a must grow for me in the winter garden. Another one I really like is called Coeur d'Abeau, which is ox heart. They are ox heart shaped. They're kind of teardrop, the heads. They take a little bit longer. I will say Red Acre is faster than them. But I like the shape of the Coeur d'Abeau. They typically are pretty pest resistant. We don't have a ton of pests in the winter, but on those fringe areas, like right before it gets really cold and then right as it's starting to warm up, the pests on brassicas can be really, really intense. And the Coeur d'Abeau seems to do pretty well. And then also, I typically do love to grow just whatever cabbage. I like all homegrown cabbages. The one that I would say stands out the most for me is the Red Acre. It just does so well and it tastes so good. Lettuce. I would say with lettuces, I don't have like certain varieties that I'm absolutely married to. I typically grab mesclun mixes and I like to grow them in green stalks. Most lettuces just taste really good in cool weather. There is one variety called speckled trout that I really like the look of it and the flavor does pretty well. And then there's another variety called Marvel of Four Seasons that I've just grown for years. And is it just significantly better than all the others? I don't know. I think mostly the thing with lettuces is if you grow them when it's not hot outside, they taste really good. And if you grow them when it's hot outside, all of them taste really bad. So just any lettuce is fine for me. I do more often grow baby greens than I grow head lettuces because I like growing them in green stalks. because I like to be able to harvest them young when they're sweet. I feel like when they get really big, it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just that I have a hard time with my area and pests and things getting bitter, but I don't grow tons of head lettuces. I've grown some. I err more towards baby greens, and I grow them more in green stalks. I've also done a video in the past showing how to grow like lettuce greens in a soil bag, where you just lay a soil bag and you cut the top off and you sow seeds in it. I usually do a couple of those in my greenhouse over the winter, and I just come out and just trim off baby greens, and we eat lettuces all throughout the winter on those. It's a really simple way to garden. You can take a Rubbermaid tote, like a storage tote, and overturn it to make a little greenhouse. I've seen pictures of people sharing doing that. I mean, all the way up into like zone 4 and 5, where they're growing things like kales and lettuces, and they're literally like pulling their tote off with snow all around, and they're harvesting stuff. So you can grow food even though you might not realize it. Carrots. Carrots are a little tricky, especially when it's warm. I find, living in a warm place, that my greatest success with carrots is to sow them like mid to late fall, when the weather's really starting to break, and to let them grow over winter, and then they really start growing early spring, and then I harvest lots of carrots in the early spring. I'm actually hoping to grow a lot of carrots this year. I've grown enough in the past that we eat them as they come in, but I'm hoping to grow a whole lot and be able to store them. We'll see. Favorite varieties? I've actually never met a carrot I didn't like. The thing with carrots is they can have multiple different flavor profiles. So you have some carrots that are very, very sweet. Typically like orange and red carrots are gonna lend more into those sweeter flavors. So like Danvers is a really good sweet carrot. There's one called, oh, I didn't write this down and I should have. Kurudu, I think is what it's called. Kurodu, something like that. It starts with a K. I know that helps you guys so much, but it's very sweet. It's like a reddish orange carrot that gets pretty big. I guess for favorites, Cosmic Purple is like a really popular variety that I've grown so many times. It's just always done really well for me. And Atomic Red. The Atomic Red lends more sweet. The Cosmic Purple lends more into a parsley flavor. So carrots are in the parsley family, and some carrots are really going to take on that parsley flavor. I actually really like that. I love sweet carrots, and I do grow Danvers to have that sweet orange carrot, but I just like the depth of flavor that less sweet carrots have, and I think that they go really great in soups and stews, which is a lot of times what I use carrots in. So those are two, but I'll grow any carrot that I can get seeds for. I like them all. Next, radishes. I would be amiss without mentioning radishes. One of my first gardening loves was the radish because it made me feel so accomplished. It is another thing that I will grow any radish that I can get seeds for, and I will probably like it pretty good. I like radishes raw, and just cut up small as a garnish for things, just to add a little bit of spice and a little pop of flavor. They're great on things like tacos or any sort of bowls or dishes that are going to be kind of heavy that you want to bring some brightness to. Radishes do great at that. With that kind of thing, there's a radish called wasabi, which is very spicy, and I really like it for that application. Watermelon radishes are some that I really love. They're white on the outside and red on the inside. They're very beautiful. I would say that's probably my favorite variety if I'm going to be making any sort of like pickled radishes, and pickled radishes are great for something to cut heavy dishes. When I make something like some sort of hash or scramble with potatoes and meat and eggs or anything like that, it's going to just be kind of heavy. Some pickled radishes on that is really great to cut through that heaviness. My favorite radish to just eat or to roast, which roasted radishes, total game changer. If you've never roasted radishes, you take them, quarter them, oil, salt, pepper, 425-degree oven for about 20 minutes until they start to crisp on the edges. They don't even taste like a radish anymore. They taste more like a potato at that point. You can season them however you want, and it's really nice if you don't have the space to grow a lot of potatoes. Radishes turn over really fast. During ideal conditions, you can grow radishes from seed to harvest in like 20-something days. In the fall and the winter, it's going to take longer. The days aren't as long, it's not as much sun, but they're still going to grow pretty quick. My favorite variety for that is French breakfast. They're typically a little bit more mild. If you have grown radishes when it was warm and you were like, these were awful, I hate them and I never want to eat them again, maybe try it again in the cooler weather. You are going to get a lot better flavor from radishes and texture from radishes in the cooler weather. And I like French breakfast because the texture is typically nicer. It's just a little bit softer. Soft isn't the right word, smoother. It's not pithy the way some of the other ones can get. Next is beets, since we're talking about roots. I almost forgot beets because for a long time I didn't like them. I don't know what was going on with that. I think I had a bad beet experience. And then we discovered beets in salads, and since then, I don't know, Jeremiah and I both have just been on a beet kick. Favorite beets are golden beets. There's a variety called Touchstone Gold I really like. I think there's one called Golden Boy. Both of those are really good, but any golden beet. And since I have loved pickled beets and love putting them on salads and have learned to love roasting them, I have found that I just really like beets in all the ways. Bull's blood is another one. Very red, very juicy, will stain your fingers and everything that they touch. Kioja is the striped beet. At this point that I learned that I like all of them, I don't mind buying blends. Like you can buy like carnival blends or multi-blends, rainbow blends of seed packages. Previously, you know, I haven't always loved buying blend seed packages because, you know, if I do like one and I don't like another, there's no way to determine when I'm planting which one I'm gonna get. So a lot of times I like to just stick with the single variety packages. But now that I know, like, I pretty much like all beets, the blends are great. And lastly, I would be amiss if I did not mention, if I had to say my favorite thing, if I had to pick one, it would probably be rutabagas. And again, something I had not really eaten until I was an adult. For those of you who live other than the United States, you may call them Swedes. Very similar to a turnip. They're very closely related, but they're a little bit different. My favorite rutabaga is called Navon Yellow, but there are purple top rutabagas. Laurentian is one. Just one is called purple top rutabaga. And I love rutabagas. My favorite way to make rutabagas is to harvest them youngish and peel them, cut them up, boil them like you're gonna make mashed potatoes, drain them, mash them with some sour cream and some chives. It is absolutely delicious. Will introduced me to a new way to eat rutabagas last year that was so good, where he literally just boils them, cuts them and boils them with some bacon and kind of makes this soupy type situation where they get soft, they take on the flavor of the bacon. It is simple farm fare. It's not fancy, it's not beautiful, but it is absolutely delicious. It's filling, and rutabagas grow really well. Like all of these things, pretty much all of these crops are super hands-off. There's not a lot of pruning. There's not a lot of work that goes into it. And I love the fact that in the winter garden, we can harvest so much delicious, nutritious, and simple food, really without a ton of input. So that's my list. These are the things that I am actively planning and beginning to plant and prepare to be able to harvest a season's worth of delicious food. So I would love to know, what do you love to grow in your cool weather garden? Is there something that I missed from this list? Is there something that I missed in the garden and I needed in my life? Let me know. Put it in the comments below. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today. I bless you. Until next time.